73 of the 20 Minute Tim's flagship podcast, and on YouTube I am joined by Martin Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
Good to be back in the hot seat.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I just want to say hello to all the Huns, ladies, guys and boys that have joined us.
So cancelled. We're going to be so cancelled.
For episode 273 of the 20 Minute Tim's flagship podcast. Stephen.
Good afternoon.
Hun nay doesn't go out of date, but I had a hunch that you knew that already.
Oh, on the spot now. Just trying to think of
Try
one.
to get another one.
Don't take it if you've not got any.
I've left you hungry.
Yes, you've left me hungry for more puns. Now that the hunning is over, Stephen, and
we've survived it so far.
Yes,
we've
survived.
survived.
We are still gainfully employed, although I think the numbers are going to be up on this episode. You know, the Sharks can smell blood in the water. The Rangers fans are ferociously.
The Bears are ravenous.
The Bears are ravenous for historic archaeological tweets and offence. And I was a wee bit disappointed, though, I've got to say, that none of them appear to have signed up to the Patreon.
There's always one or two. Always one or two. I've noticed.
Anytime a Stephen signs up to the Patreon, you're looking for that PH of the V to see if you're going to be uncovered. And one did sign up, but I had a wee scour and everything seems okay.
Campbell Mason signed up the other day. Yeah.
So did Argyle Cameron. He signed up, but it all seems above board. But one person that is no longer gainfully employed, and we don't think it's down to historic tweets, is Celtic Chief Executive Dom McKay.
Good night, sweet Princess
Sky.
2021 to 2021. We barely knew you. Melly, Stephen and I recorded a reaction podcast. We were meant to do the Friday phone-in, which is a question and answer podcast we do for the patrons. Patreon.com/20minutetims if you want to get involved in that every fortnight. But we cancelled that because Dom McKay left the job, and we recorded the reaction podcast instead. But you weren't on it. You didn't get the opportunity to give us your immediate thoughts about Dom McKay leaving. So rewind the clock back. You first heard the news. What did you think?
Yeah, I was obviously shocked. I thought once it got this transfer window, when it shut a couple of weeks ago, this is when we'd see, right, that's that over. We've got all that sorted. Yeah. Let's see what we're going to do staff-wise and this modernisation, this brave new world, as you called it, Stephen, that Dom McKay spoke to the fans about, and then he's gone. And it's just that first instinct, you go, right, okay, so he either wasn't very good or the board don't like him.
Yeah.
Either way, they spent months and months tracking this guy, getting him in, bringing him in, and he's left longer than they were after him for.
Yeah.
Shorter. I mean, it just seems like Celtic are just becoming one of these clubs where you think, what's going to be next? What's going to be next? Because we thought once we got all these players in, we went, right, okay, that window was shambolic after everything that happened. Let's get this out the way. We've got from September to January to get our ducks in order, and then we can get a couple of signings in January and hopefully have all this structure in place. And now we're set back further than we were for even like going back to the end of last season. All that's really changed is Ange Postecoglou's come in.
Yeah.
Nothing else backstage.
So, Stephen, obviously when Dom first left, there was right away people are trying to point their fingers of blame. Whose fault is it? And obviously the Celtic board were getting it. Dom McKay was getting it. Celtic were briefing. No sooner had Dom McKay left the building that our phones are ringing. You know, people trying to, from within the club, trying to get their side of this story across. Not that they weren't backstabbing Dom McKay, but they're saying, look, this is kind of what happened. I have it on good authority that us anyway, and I'm sure other members of, quote, fan media, were actually contacted before press journalists. So we got the briefing before
ITK.
Yeah, before the guys in the newspapers and all that sort of stuff. So obviously that's where the pecking order lies with bad news breaks with Celtic now. They're rushing to put the social media and Twitter fires out before the guys can get to their typewriters and however you produce a newspaper column nowadays. There would be cards in their hats, you know what I mean?
They all run into phone boxes against the wall as well. They all got hot off the press, guys.
So we got the steer on what was happening. The Celtic steer was, it was just basically no working. Wrong guy, wrong movie. This whole thing was they panning out very well. Obviously, there's a different train of thought that Dom McKay was this forward-thinking, futuristic, had all these brilliant ideas, and the Celtic board are just a whole bunch of dinosaurs that didn't.
They'd had it with his maverick renegade ways.
Aye, basically, like he envisaged something like the Jetsons for Celtic, whereas the Celtic board are more like the Flintstones,
right?
You know, and that's kind of it. I've got to say, from everything I've read and heard and be told, that is not the case. It's not the case that Dom McKay had all these brilliant futuristic ideas and he was trying to take. I as far as I understand it, there's no hatchet job to be had on either side here. It was just a case of it wasn't really working. Perhaps Dom McKay wasn't fully able to get to grips with the task at hand, and key members of the Celtic backroom team and Celtic departments and people within the club started to kind of lose faith in the Dom McKay thing a wee bit. And
it's very harsh.
No,
it is harsh. It is, but we've all been in workplaces where, and I think this is maybe the case for this. I'm just speculating here. This is, if I know anything, I will tell you. I know it in advance, but I'm just speculating. I wonder if maybe it was a case that people within the club kind of liked the way Peter Lawwell did things because he managed to achieve things. The way he did it worked. It maybe wasn't the best, but it worked. And then as Dom McKay comes in, it's not really working. So he's dealing with all these departments, and the feedback is kind of from everybody. Very quickly, the feedback is, this guy's not seem to get it.
Well,
and when that picture builds up, it's very difficult to shake that reputation off, especially so early. So sometimes maybe you're just best nipping it in the bud. Maybe you're better just both of you sitting down and going, this isn't working.
You might be it. Like I'm not privy to it at all, but Dom McKay's coming in here from a rugby background into this place where Peter Law's had the rule of the roost for how long. It's obviously going to be different. Dom McKay's coming in alongside a manager, and that's it. No director of football, no head of scouting, no head of football operations. It's all gone, and he's had to come in and sort of deal with all this. How's he going to be instantly good at everything if he's got all this to deal with?
I think the problem, Stephen, is there was definite conflict I've heard over the director of football thing. Dom McKay wanted to bring in a director of football, as far as I've heard, and there was resistance to that. Yeah, but that, and this is what I'll say, right? Look, there's going to be a lot of dick advocating on here, because I would rather our listeners get angry at the facts and got like as big a picture as we can paint, right? That could be, not that the board don't want a director of football, but by the time Dom McKay starts putting forward ideas for director of football, they already think, well, no, you're director of football because you're no the guy, so why would we implement anything that you really want, because we don't trust you anyway. Stephen, do you understand that dynamic,
Can I just say before we go any further how utterly exhausted I am by this entire subject? See, this to be sitting here in September talking about the structure of the club again.
No.
We just about got through the summer without boring each other to absolute tears, talking about directors of football and CEOs and modernising and world-class this and the future of that. And to be sitting here weeks into the season and we're starting all over again, I'm utterly exhausted and bored of the subject.
Yeah.
But what I'm left with here is a choice of two things, and we'll get into all the speculation. And I'm glad you said, look, we're only speculating here. We do hear things on occasion, but the thing is, like, people kind of jump on you and say, well, only deal with the facts, and I'm just kind of like, well, no.
It's a fans podcast.
Clean shirts out there jump on you and expect you to be like
we're not Reuters.
Expect us to be Reuters. We are three guys in the figurative pub talking about the club we follow, right? We reserve the right to speculate on things because, that's part of being a football fan. But what I'm left with is two things, and we'll discuss the various merits of that. Either one, as you say, Dom McKay was just too damn good, just too much of a maverick renegade for these fusty old dinosaurs, and he couldn't get his brilliant ideas through, or it just didn't work. He wasn't good enough for the role, and no one was particularly impressed with him. However, both of those lines lead to the board appointed him in the first place, presumably after an exhaustive search for the best candidate for the role.
Yeah, but there's also a third scenario where both of those things are correct, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And that scenario is probably what I think is quite likely, is that Celtic think so insularly that they want things done a certain way. So they want things done, let's call it the Peter Lawwell way, right?
Just a name for it off the top of our heads, yeah.
And externally, right? People from the outside look at Celtic and go, well, this needs to change. But inside Celtic think, well, no, because what we've done is right, and why would we change? So the guy comes in, so Dom McKay comes in. He's all the talk about, interference and transfers on Gordon Strachan, we'll get to the minutiae of it. But Dom McKay comes in, doesn't really win anybody over, doesn't really have any ideas that they're buying into, and they sort of lose confidence in the guy. But maybe what's needed is an entire clear out and brand new thinking entirely.
Yeah.
So within the four walls of Celtic Park, it all makes sense to them. Well, we don't really buy into your ideas, Dom, and it doesn't work for us, and we don't really have confidence in you. But if you just open the doors and let other people see a different result, but that's not to say Dom McKay was the guy to do that.
No.
I'm just saying externally looking in, maybe the whole thing needs to change. The whole dynamic inside Celtic Park needs to change.
I think it probably does, but see if that's correct. Why bring in Dom McKay then? Why not promote from within or bring in somebody that
Well, I think there was a
already
couple
there
of
that
people.
you want? Because if it's going to be somebody comes in, and whether McKay was good or bad, it doesn't sound like they were willing to take on his ideas.
So does that point to maybe a board who are looking to take on new ideas, but maybe Dom McKay was just the wrong guy? Maybe because
this was going to be my point on the director of football. See, when you said about Dom McKay was wanting to bring in this director of football in the Celtic board, think, we want to go down this route. Looking historically at the Celtic board and looking at Dom McKay spoke about Brentford, Seville, Michelin, looking at these teams. Apparently went and looked at Salzburg. Who did the board bring in to help out? Gordon Strachan. So I'm looking at that going, maybe he's wanting somebody that could maybe take things away from the way the board want to go, and they're just wanting to go with the tried
I have heard
and
that Dom
tested.
McKay felt undermined by Gordon Strachan. I have heard that. I heard that Dom McKay went down one path with recruiting that particular role and spoke to some other people about getting that role. Then Gordon Strachan turns up in that role and he felt undermined by it. Now, again, Stephen, we discussed this in the reaction. Undermining can happen two ways. It can be, we don't have enough confidence in you, so we're going to start making the decisions for you.
Don't like how you're pointing to me when you're
Yes.
saying that.
Melly, we're going to bleed him. We don't have enough confidence in you, so we're going to undermine you for the good of the business. This guy needs undermined.
Yeah, I don't think it's much of a leap to arrive at he felt undermined by Gordon Strachan here, because he's on record as saying Gordon Strachan isn't coming back to the club, or at least he wasn't in the plans. Remember, he was asked
For the director of football role.
I think he was asked bluntly if Gordon Strachan was in the frame for that job. And fair enough, he isn't yet. He isn't in that role yet, but he has come in some sort of
being very important.
Yet, big old yet in the middle.
Now.
Yeah, but Gordon Strachan, a matter of weeks later, was in some sort of strange, unknown role that very few people understood. I think there was a little bit of kind of open arms to him, but saying like he's a right good football man, all that kind of stuff. He's got huge experience in the game, all that kind of stuff. So a few people did welcome him in, but many eyebrows. Let's say lots of eyebrows.
Dermot's man at Lennoxtown. That's I think what Gordon Strachan was.
Yeah, and I don't think
the Colombo, the one we joked about on the Patreon podcast. I think that probably wasn't a million miles away from accurate.
Just grassing everyone in for this. Spending far too much behind the scenes here. But in summary, I don't think it's too much of a leap to say, look, he's been slightly embarrassed by that in public by saying Gordon Strachan isn't in the plans. He didn't even do the, Gordon Strachan's one of a number of people we have a lot of respect for, blah, blah, blah. He just said, no, that's not in the immediate plans. And about 2 weeks later, that's when the ball started rolling on this role that Gordon Strachan was getting. So that, perception is everything in this. When we're talking about someone being undermined, that doesn't look good in public at all.
See, the whole Eddie Howe thing as well, although we're happy with Ange and all that, but I remember saying at the time, the Celtic board and the negotiations were started this before Dom McKay was in the door. He wasn't even in his wee consultancy thing, I think, when this had started. And I said the Celtic board couldn't convince the unemployed former Bournemouth manager that we were the club for him to take forward. Now you're looking at it going, well, all that's happened since then is a manager's come in and Dom McKay's come in, and Dom McKay's now left because he can't work within this board one way or the other. So even if McKay's not good, but something's not working within that. Something very, very wrong with this club that is happening time and time again here.
There's also the issue of managers. Now, Ange Postecoglou was brought in there's obviously obvious links to the City group through Ange and previous contacts that Celtic have had at board level, and extenuating out from that, the rumours now that Ange was brought in, he wasn't so much a Dom McKay appointment, which we got wind of at the time, and it's precisely why we asked Dom McKay at the fans press conference, is Ange Postecoglou 100% your man? Absolutely, yep, I hired him, that's me, because we got wind at the time that wasn't, Dom wanted to go another way, but this was an appointment brought in by the likes of Peter Law. And I thought Ange's comments were quite interesting after the game when he said, we need to be careful about the narrative about who brought me to this club. And that to me seemed like a clear signal to say, I'm no Dom McKay's man. I wasn't hired by him.
See, to be fair to Dom McKay here, at the time when we were going for Eddie Howe, most people were delighted with that, thought that is exactly the way we should be going. See, when it came out, Ange Postecoglou, I mean, you said on the Reaction podcast, never heard of him. And I was the same. So if you're Dom McKay coming into this new role, surely you want an easy win, come in, get Eddie Howe in, and that's a big one. That's you, 1-0 to you, and you can go on for there. Going for Eddie Howe to Ange Postecoglou, no matter how much I love Ange now, who I think he's the right man for the job, it was pretty crazy going from that to that. It was so extreme, and you're having to look into this guy and love what you see now. But back then you're going, Dom McKay coming in with this guy from Australia, that's a big one. So if Dom McKay, if it's not his appointment, then from his very first couple of days he's getting undermined again.
But if you look at it, Stephen, we're talking about easy wins, and that's one thing that I'd said about Dom. I said I wasn't particularly impressed with Dom McKay. I said I didn't think he'd be about long. I was pretty surprised at the lack of easy wins. If this isn't a hatchet job in Dom McKay, we're just discussing frankly and openly how his tenure went, and I would ask anyone to point to one thing that Dom McKay did that would suggest that he was this evolving force that was going to turn the club around. I mean, he only had 12 weeks, but it's still 3 months to make an impression.
12 players brought in who all look like they're going to be first team players, but also...
But I think on the players we need to be aware now that it's come out that Dom McKay, help was drafted in forOm apparently to get these deals done.
There had to be, but because there's no director of football, there's no head of recruitment.
Nothing to do with that. It wasn't to do with that. It was to do with the fact that Dom struggled to get deals done, struggled to navigate the transfer market, struggled to navigate negotiations with other clubs. All these things.
Should there not be somebody there to do that? But coming in as a CEO, is that a CEO's job? I don't think it is.
I think it was expected of him to be able to handle. I think what I'm saying is, without trying to unpick the role itself, what I'm saying is parts of the job that he was expected to be able to do, the meat and the potatoes of his job, some of it he was rumoured to be struggling with, hence why other people were drafted into a system with it. It's not a case of should he be doing this, would he be doing it, it's a case of the meat and potatoes of his job, he was struggling with the transfer side of things. And to me, I'm not discounting everything he's done, this is just the rumours that are coming out now, and the stories that are coming out, and people might not like to hear it, but it's just what's out there. I would point to one thing in the 12 weeks that he done. There was no big win. It was what I was banging on about for ages. Where's the big wins? Where is?
Maybe a director of football could have been that if they'd appointed a few more people, because we had a podcast out, the title of which was "Where's the Rest of It?" Because remember, Ange Postecoglou came in, Dom McKay. We were left thinking, right, okay, that's a start, but where's the rest of it? We need to keep improving. We need to keep modernising all the stuff we were hearing at the time.
If I hear the word modernising
exactly.
one more time.
As I said, I'm so tired of this subject. It's unbelievable. I thought it was wrapped up. I thought we could just concentrate on the football, but here we are. Mid-September, we're talking about this stuff again. It's honestly incredible. But maybe a director of football would have signified something. I have to wonder though, just how bad it was in such a short space of time that all this
Jock Brown lasted over the season.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was like he's running about falling out every day. It's absolutely terrible. I just think it was a distinct lack. I think, or rather I've heard as well, which has helped form my opinion on this, that within a couple of weeks, the higher ups, aka Dermot Desmond and some others within the club, weren't particularly impressed with this guy.
Again, that's my point though. Like, what were they expecting in this short space of time for a guy that they headhunted? They specifically earmarked
from a rugby background.
I think a couple of people. I think one name I've heard is Ian Bankier really went to bat for this guy,
right?
And he more or less staked his reputation on Dom, saying, look, this is the guy.
Josh McKinley, did he?
Yeah.
Jesus.
And as a result of that, I think we're going to see Ian Bankier maybe out of a job within the next 12 weeks as well. There'll be a change there. Whether or not that's Peter Lawwell takes that chairman's role is another story.
Gordon Strachan probably hired.
Gordon Strachan just hanging about.
Neil Lennon, any one of these
just
guys.
hanging about waiting to pick up whatever job's going at the club. So I think Dermot Desmond had to be charmed on the Dom McKay thing. I think he was always sceptical. And I think other departments became more and more sceptical, and I think a frank conversation was had where they both just went, it's not working, is it? I don't think there's any... I mean, as much as people want there to be like a big juicy fallout, or, you know, this narrative that the board are all dinosaurs and they don't understand modern football and we understand it better than them and Dom McKay understood it better. I mean, that might be true. I just don't... There's nothing coming out of the ether to suggest that. It's a good story, and it's what people want to hear right now about the Celtic board.
It's an inside job.
There's just nothing coming out. No, I'm not. I mean, we hear things. We see, even when you read things on Twitter and newspaper reports. Alison McConnell's quite close to it. Stephen McGowan's quite close to it. He was on Graham Spears' podcast recently. All these things you're listening to, none of that narrative just doesn't really exist out there. One thing you can garner from it though is, are Celtic too insular, which is, you know, a question we've asked. And two, why does Dermot Desmond have so much power? He only owns 30% of this company.
Yeah, he's no Roman Abramovich or something like that. I know he doesn't have really an official job or anything like that at the club, but yet he seems to just be this overlord hanging over everything. So that is, I can't. He's a deeply unpopular figure these days, Dermot Desmond, with certain people. I mean, a lot of people just don't hear anything bad said about the board or Dermot Desmond, which is fine. But
a few and far between. But these days,
I think it's reasonable to say that he's not a particularly popular figure. So I think people will automatically see whatever they think of Dom McKay, they'll use this as an excuse to have a go at the board anyway, but regardless of how Dom McKay did. But I mean, that's not me saying anyone's wrong here, because I've already explained here that my position on it is, well, A or B, the board have made a key error here anyway.
Yeah, they have.
The only reason we're talking about this so much on what is generally a football podcast is because, you know, this all filters down ultimately.
Celtic can't stop fucking
0 days since our last nonsense, basically. 0 days since Celtic's last nonsense. We're talking about this, and obviously we're a couple of days on from it now, and our reaction, I was talking about how my immediate reaction is to fear for like Ange Postecoglou. Now, it might turn out that, you know, he just wasn't Dom McKay's guy, and that's been a little bit of spin on it to make them both look good, a united front for the media and fan media. I'm encouraged by suggestions that he wasn't a Dom McKay appointment though, because if he was, I would start to worry, well, that's the manager's support system just been pulled out from under him. Who's his guy now at the club? So hopefully it's not as simple as that. And
that's speculation, but we're hoping that's the case.
It's 100% speculation. I just need to hope that Postecoglou does have people that are behind him, that are supporting him through this role, because he definitely needs it. He's doing absolutely everything just now, and that's why I go back to this director of football thing. That has completely died a death. We got a wee bit of it during the transfer window when he said we'll address that after the window, but there was even stuff during the window about how Postecoglou was basically doing the bulk of the scouting himself. He's just sitting watching videos and players. So the guy's just basically running the club himself with Dermot Desmond.
He said things like that at his post-match. It's like, I'm here to build a club. I mean, it's in one way, you're quite thankful for a manager like Ange Postecoglou who sees this as a project and is quite willing to get his hands dirty and roll his hands up, because other managers could be sitting here going on their agent, get me to fucking get me.
You say that, but how many jobs in Postecoglou's career has he just walked out on because things aren't going his way? Yeah. So if he does go, this is the whole problem of not having a structure. We're going to be back past square one, square zero with
Jack
this,
Ross,
because
get him on the phone.
nobody.
I think that's what it needs. I think we need square zero now. There's no doubt now that the board, and I don't even know who's on the board at Celtic. I couldn't even name them. I don't really pay
found
attention.
out a couple of names over the last couple of days.
I don't pay attention to the suits that really run the club, but
the beaks.
They need, you know, an executive, whoever that executive hierarchy at Celtic is, really needs cleared out. And people have been saying, you know, people that sort of know these things on other podcasts have been saying that's basically what's going to happen. You know, that there's going to be a clear out. Ian Bankier's going to go. The non-executive directors are going to go. But
does Desmond stay then, or
I think Desmond does stay, but you'll probably end up with Ross Desmond on the board, his son, in some capacity. But
I suppose we'll find out over time,
But
What's
just let me
happened
make the
here?
point. Let me put a wee
Right,
button
cool.
on it. The point I was making was we are back to square -0.
Yeah.
And we've got a January transfer window coming up, and we need to do business there. And Ange presumably's got a couple of targets from Japan lined up that he wants to bring in. All this the BS can't continue.
There's £40 million possibly riding on this. If you win the league, you go straight into the Champions
It
League.
should be really simple. You're making an arse of running our club. You're making an arse of running our club. You made an arse of it last year. You've started to make an arse of it this year. It's that simple. They need to get their act together in there, because from watching from the outside, it's no good enough, and fans are a wee bit pissed off with it. And it's not just a case of you're pissed off because you lost the league. You're pissed off because the shenanigans just roll on week after week after week. And it doesn't matter if Dom McKay, Steve, was a bad fit, or he didn't like the cut his jib, or he turned up late for his work, or he didn't know what he was doing. It's your fault you hired him.
Yeah.
And you had enough time to figure out whether or not. And if it's a case of one guy went to bat, that's not how a club should work. It shouldn't be everyone behind the scenes is unsure, but he's got a pal in the boardroom, and that's who gets him the job. Like, what's going on?
Heard the word jibs so often this weekend. It's been unbelievable.
Yeah, it wasn't Charlie Mulgrew. I don't think it was Charlie Mulgrew.
It wasn't. He has since
denied.
confirmed, and he released a parody recording of it in which he spoke about a big bag of jibs everywhere or something like that. But again,
Do you know what a jib is?
no idea.
I think it's a sailing thing, which
All
is
right.
quite apt for Dom McKay. I think a jib is one of the sails on a sailboat. I think it might be the front one.
Education
There you
on the
go.
Is that
Aye.
where the cut his jib comes from?
Yeah, I believe so. Aye.
There we are. That is a jib. There we
Yeah,
are.
somebody in the comments, the YouTube comments below, let me know. But I'm pretty sure cut your jib is a sailing thing.
But the reason I keep coming back to the football stuff, because again, it might just seem like we're sitting here just talking about
It's the bit that's
suits.
going to suffer.
Yeah,
isn't it?
that we're sitting here talking about suits, and ultimately another suit will come in and fill this role, and things will just keep rolling. Ultimately, that's what will happen eventually. But I'm worried about how many times last season did we say, look, we're no experts here, but we've been around football a long time.
We are
How often
experts.
does this turn around? How often does it?
Yeah.
We are experts.
I was trying to be modest,
I was
but
trying to be very modest.
7
It
seasons in,
didn't
we're
work.
experts. Come on.
I was just looking at that last season and thinking, how often does this turn around? Like
Yeah.
the state we're in just now, how often does that turn around? And it's nowhere near that level. That's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is, how often do basket case clubs behind the scenes work through it and just become successful on the pitch? Eventually that filters through and just starts permeating everything.
The triangular stale set forward of the mast. So there we are. That is a jib. Have Celtic acted decisively here, though, in bringing an end to this 12 weeks in rather than letting it trundle down the road?
It depends on
The context,
how it went.
obviously.
That's the whole problem. I suppose time will tell. We'll get to find out soon enough if we go out and appoint a director of football and appoint this and that. But you really start to think, right, okay, so this is the middle of September. This isn't going to be sorted in a month.
No.
It's not going to be
No.
sorted in 2 months, and we're still no further forward in all this. And January's going to be massive again, because even though we signed 12 players, we are still very short. And if Celtic suffer a couple of injuries, look at the state of the bench at the weekend with a few injuries. We are still woefully short soon. Andrew's spoken about, well, he's happy with his coaches, but he maybe needs some people in the background. Jack Naylor, the head of sports science, left in July or something, still not been replaced. All these things have to be addressed, and that's not to say that Lennoxtown could be improved. There's all this stuff to do that we thought, Dom McKay will come in and we're talking all this. At least he was talking the game. There's nobody there to talk the game now.
That's the problem. With every week that goes on, these improvements that need made are not being made, and we thought, right, okay, CEO comes in, Dom McKay, top guy for the job, and obviously Michael Nicholson stepped into the role. Remains to be seen whether or not he's going to remain in place. Honestly, struggling to drum up any anger about that at all. Honestly, I
don't know who he is.
I know. I'm struggling to really care about whether or not it's Michael Nicholson or some other suit that occupies the role. But Stephen, the point is, and the worry is, not the point, but the worry here is that the longer this trundles on, the less likely we are to get this ship righted. Now, we could go if it's going to have one season, right, where things don't go Celtic's way and it's a season of transition, it's this one. But it cannot rumble into next season. Like, we can't still be trying to rebuild come January and new CEO and blah 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 and new backroom staff and all this and everything else is put on ice until we've got this sorted.
If we're to accept a season of transition, absolutely fine. I think broadly, we talk a lot about how you need to win every game, you need to win the league or else it's nothing or else it's failure, right? Okay, but I think some more reasonable people among us, I can only speak for myself, thinks that, right, of course I desperately want to win the league this season, but the damage that was done, we've spoken about this before, the damage that was done in the last couple of years takes time to fix, right? Okay, so that's the position I'm in. So I accept that this season might be one of huge transition, but don't torpedo the thing within a month of it starting. Don't just completely shoot ourselves in the foot. Is this
already the transition of the transition?
We're transitioning away from the transition already.
The remix to transmission.
Terrific stuff. I mean, again, I don't want to be talking about stuff like this in September. I really don't, but we're forced to again, and it's so annoying. It's just
nothing to do with Peter Lawwell, apparently. Again, that's what I've heard. You know, there's these rumours that Peter Lawwell was in this and working people for the back.
It's always going to happen.
Apparently, it's nothing to do with Peter Lawwell. He's not involved. He's barely answering his phone to Celtic. I have heard contrary rumours though that he was drafted in to assist with transfers. So what?
The Peter Lawwell thing as well. Like, see if he was to be believed, he micromanaged absolutely everything. Would it not kind of take more than one man or one person to do his job?
Yeah.
Surely, if he's doing everything within the club, you need.
Well, that's
Dom
what happened when
McKay.
Tom Ford left Gucci.
you need other people in, because if he is doing everything, how does Dom McKay come in and instantly know how to do everything, especially when Peter Law was a month's transition or whatever, then he wasn't be seen again. So.
But I don't think the issue is like on the job learning. I think the issue is generally no getting it. You know what I mean? Like if he got it and people were saying like we could help him out, or he does this, he does. I just think the whole issue was a complete lack of confidence in the appointment. Now
I'm happy to believe that maybe Dom McKay wasn't very good at this, right? Mm-hmm. But when I'm looking at the board and look at the evidence of last season, I'm going, I can't really put that.
Because what the proposition and I think what you're saying is the proposition we've got here is the board are saying, trust us, this guy's not up to much, and we're looking at the board going, what's your shit? That's what's happening.
I have to wonder
they told us to trust us last season. We ended up 25 points
What
behind.
was going on behind the scenes here? Do you think the board, I think Ian Bankier was like his first couple of days sending Dom McKay for a long stand and a bucket of tartan paint and stuff like that, got a box of blue sparks and all that?
I think it was like within like 3 weeks, Dom sticking his head in the office, he's going, John, random employee, where do we keep the paper? And John's like, I don't know, mate. It's just I need to get this contract faxed over to. Oh, can I tell you I don't deal with paper? You'll need to speak to HR. And he's just like slowly backing out the room, and it was like he was getting. So he's going into the canteen for his lunch, and he's sitting down at tables, and like people are just leaving with half full plates, and he's just sat there himself, like. And I think it was kind of like that.
See, another thing that sprung to my mind today was it the Soppy deal, the right back that Celtic had used intermediaries, and they weren't happy with that. And
he said there was too many people involved in it, which again comes back to the Dom McKay struggling to get deals in, and people are going.
Or maybe it's they're using somebody else, because apparently it wasn't Dom McKay that went over they sent somebody over from England and that.
Well, yeah, because there was a story in the Athletic, which obviously came from speaking to football agents, that said there was confusion about who to contact at Celtic over transfers, and it just speaks to me of a complete lack of confidence in the guy, you know. And you're no defending what's going on at Celtic insofar as it's all rosy and it's all great.
I try to look at it from both angles.
But part of me now is thinking, what if Dom McKay was left his own? Just think for a moment that Dom McKay wasn't actually very good at what he was doing. He was out of his depth, or just in the wrong movie, or maybe it was a wrong fit for him. Think for a moment what would happen if he was just left it, and how the transfer window might have went.
I know there's agents out there trying to email the information they've been given. It's like domrugbyhotshot at yahoo.co.uk at ntworld.com. Are you sure?
There was, again, it's all retrospective. We discussed some of it on podcasts and in the Discord and all that, but even stuff during the transfer window, we were hearing that phrases like he's too nice, Dom McKay, he's too nice for these he's not like cutthroat enough. And one of the things we discussed when he first came in was we did on this podcast discuss that the difficulty with having a guy who's not in the world of football is Peter Lawwell could pick the phone up to Rod Petrie and get a deal done for a Hibs player.
Rod Petrie's a bad example.
Peter could pick the phone up to Rod Petrie and not get a deal done for a Hibs player. But like he'd pick the phone up and he'd have a relationship and he had the contact book of people in football and he knew who to phone to get this and that and these deals done. And Dom McKay was basically starting from scratch. It's almost like if Dom McKay probably needed a year in the job, as you're saying, but he didn't have that foundation of trust.
A year alongside Peter Lawwell. Maybe Peter Lawwell's went like that. They're all hounding me out there. I'm getting protests. I'm going to show them. I'm going to get a shite guy in, and then they'll see how they
A guy who's
going to have a bloody mutiny in your hands.
A guy who's going to turn up for his first day at work with a blue suit on as well. He never recovered for that moment.
By what it looks like, it was Ian Bankier and Peter Lawwell that really went for Dom McKay.
But what does that tell you? This is Peter Lawwell, the same guy that brought Neil Lennon back.
Yeah.
Peter, his judgment must be way off. His judgment must be way off. If Peter Lawwell can't have anything to do with Celtic anymore, because if he's responsible for Neil Lennon and he's responsible for Dom McKay, then you've lost it. Your judgment's gone.
He's clearly not going to be responsible because he had to get the whole board to agree to these appointments, didn't he? So whether it's Peter Lawwell or the guys in there, change has to happen now because we cannot continue with this archaic view, even if, like what Stephen said, either way, this is on the board again.
Yeah, 100%. There's nobody else to blame, and it's not one of this like sort of figures that exist in the ether that you just blame everything on the board. There's a direct line here from a bad appointment, which is a bad appointment, directly to the board.
We even spoke to guys from the world of rugby who said this guy's a classy operator. Was it Rob Robertson said, look, he's classy operator, good at PR, all that sort of stuff. And
maybe didn't have maybe you need to be a classy operator. You need to be a high something individual. When these guys that was really good at doing jobs, Stephen, I can't remember the exact word. High functioning individual. Maybe you also need a big set of stones to do that job, and maybe
what an unpleasant image.
Cojones.
Maybe needed brass cojones to do that job. I mean, maybe you needed to be a bit of a dick,
a bit of a bastard,
a bit of a bastard to do this job, and maybe that's what Dom McKay. Look. You don't want to sit here and criticise the guy because the fact of the matter is Dom McKay's probably signed a non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see if there's any leaks from his side of the story.
Standard practice, really, but he is ultimately a comms guy, so I wouldn't be surprised if something came out from his end, indirectly, of course.
I don't think there's anything from Celtic's end that's necessarily unfair to Dom McKay. Everything that Celtic, certainly the phone call we had with Celtic, it was very polite, very... just sort of the stuff that you've read in the newspapers.
Like his dream job, he described it as the only
it's my
reason.
dream job, I know. Give me a shot.
I'll get loads of suits. Qualified.
What?
Well,
Neither was he.
Apart from the suit, well,
I'm probably more qualified than Dom.
Clearly now.
Tell you what, I would last 12 weeks in that job.
Because your cojones.
Because of my cojones. That's the only thing I've got.
It lasts longer than that, just locking yourself in the office, just barricading yourself
Gordon
in.
Strachan's going to be there longer than he's on a part-time basis.
We made a joke in the Reaction podcast about Gordon Strachan being a sort of Columbo figure.
That was a good wee skit.
Just going about... Oh, did you listen? Thanks very much. Just going about Celtic. And I think that's probably quite accurate.
Have you seen what they're spending on petrol? Have you seen what they're spending on ketchup in this?
He's like, I don't really... He's no good. Look, end of the day, Dom McKay has departed the building. He's gone. I don't know what he did, if he managed to do anything whilst he was at the club. Obviously, there's a lot to get done. It's very difficult. He came with the best intentions, and it's you feel for the guy because it's a high profile job that he's lost, and it's very easy for three guys who've never achieved anywhere near as much as Dom McKay has in the world of
podcasting.
In the world of game, I mean, in podcasts.
Yeah,
I mean, Dom, he can do what we do. He couldn't reach the heights.
Why do you think they came to us in the first place?
Exactly.
How do you think they came to fan media?
Can he reach the heights of the 20-minute times of the podcast world? But he's in business. He's useless. He's this. He's that. That's not Dom McKay personally. It's just in the Celtic job. He obviously just couldn't get it done.
Well, joking aside, of course, it is it's a shame that it's worked out. Obviously, as fans, again, we talk about suits far too much for my liking, forced to by Celtic's shenanigans. But ultimately, we wanted the guy to do well because it was this is what we were promised. It was the brave new world and all that. But he's gone, and it's embarrassing for him as well because there's no way he would have planned to be out of a job within 72 2 days or whatever the hell it is. So it's embarrassing from that point of view as well. I'm sure he's probably smarting over it, or whether maybe he's just relieved to get out of the place. Who knows? I'm sure that'll come out.
It's probably I can imagine there's a bit mutual. I can imagine even he at times during Celtic was like, this place is like, he's probably come in here with all these good ideas, and he's probably thinking, these guys just all they want is just to do things the way it's always been done.
Yeah. And I suppose, look, again, time will tell, but see if in a couple of months' time we're sitting there with Ian Nicholson still in the job and Gordon Strachan just so happens to be made director of football, you go, right, we're going to need to maybe revisit the fact that Dom McKay wasn't very good at his job.
You're right, time will tell. It's just like the transfer window. In a couple of months we'll tell how good the transfer window was. In a couple of months we'll tell, whoever comes into the job whether or not they do what's required. But I don't think there's any doubt that this fallout over the director of football, whether it was Celtic don't want one, or whether it was they didn't want the director of football that Dom McKay was proposing, or whatever happened, the fallout over director of football, it's impossible for a club like Celtic to operate without one.
Yeah. Clearly, look at the summer. If 12 players in, 16 out at that massive turnover, and even now, like we're struggling to get a bench at the weekend that's not full of boys from the youth team. So.
And we're not being reactionary here. This is what we said all along. It's absurd for a club of Celtic's size and
any club.
Exactly. But the markets and the level that Celtic hope to or purport to operate at, there's no way they should be running a club with what was essentially Peter Lawwell and Neil Lennon just guiding the ship last season. And that's what they've looked to have done this season. It was just Dom McKay and Ange Postecoglou.
No, it's just Ange.
No, it's just Ange. The broad shoulders of Ange Postecoglou carrying the whole thing.
Well, he's obviously quite comfortable with that because, as I said, he seemed to be quite clear in setting the message straight after the Ross County game.
Get a choice, does it?
Well, do you? I did consider that, right? But I also think Andrew's going to go and just say it and to placate the newspapers or placate the fans. I think if he was angry or upset or pissed off, he didn't have to. He didn't have to say anything, but what he didn't have to say was, let's be careful of the narrative about who brought me to this club. Because that to me is a clear message
that's fair enough that
brought him to the club.
He said that, but at the end of the day, Celtic exists to win football games. And if that stops happening in the near future, we're already 3 points behind. If results start to go wrong, it's not going to be Ange that gets it. It's going to be back on the board because of all this. So they have to be very careful.
And that's it.
And you don't want the pressure on the manager, because after the upheaval in the summer, he's already up against it this season. 25 points behind Rangers, 25 points to make up on 12 players in, trying to build a new team. And now this, you're at, oh man.
I think the pressure is on Ange. I do think the pressure on him because see, as long as this train keeps going down the line and people keep winning and the team keep winning football games, the fans will be happier than they were apart from all the crap that's going on in the background. But the minute this team stops winning football games, that's when the focus turns back on absolutely everything. We did, luckily, Stephen, get the win against Ross County. 3-0 at the weekend. Obviously, it wasn't the best of games. It was a bit perfunctory. It didn't feel like a 3-0 game. We were at it. We were all at it, obviously. Watched it. A lot of the new lineups that we brought in, a lot of the new players, rather, that we brought in January featured in the lineup. Carter Vickers, Juranovic was there. Jota was there. Albion Ayeti, almost like a new signing, starting up front. What did you make of the new signings in the lineup?
Good. A mixed bag, which is always going to be the case with so many either debutants or making their home debut, or guys who have, you remarked during the game that this, after a certain amount of players, I think after Rogic went off, there was basically an entire new team of players that had been here at maximum 14 or 15 months or so, just going back to last season. So it's a new look team, and it's always going to be a bit of a mixed bag trying to get that to gel. Overall, the game, I thought it was just a good win to get. Don't get me wrong, it's good. It's always good to get back on winning ways and all that, because we've dropped a couple recently, most notably against Rangers, and Alkmaar wasn't a big deal, of course, to lose that game, but still 2 defeats very recently. Good to get back to winning ways, but I think the game overall was one of those games that, from experience of doing this for a long time, I'm talking about all the games and watching them a couple of times and analysing them to death, seasons are just made up of those. Seasons are made up of those games that you just turn up, get the 3 points, keep a clean sheet, hopefully don't get any injuries, move on, and no one's going to remember it come the end of the season. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we can win the league back. No one's going to be casting back to that time we sort of labelled to a 3 points against Ross County, because I don't mean to imply that it was a terrible performance. It just wasn't great. It just wasn't up to the standard of what we've seen recently. But huge changes to the team, key players either having left or are missing, such as Kyogo, and still get the job done pretty handily.
Look, on the positives, Melly, if you are worried or concerned about being sacked from your job about controversial tweets, the Ross County manager is a bastion and example to everyone to show you that you can be reformed and you can find gainful employment after saying nasty words. What did you make of the Celtic lineup? The new guys, rather.
I was excited about the lineup because of the new guys mainly, and it sort of looked like, right, that's the window shut. This is the start of this team. A few players to come back from injury and that, but excited. Just that bench really worried me because of the lack of options there. But we were missing Giacomakis, Forrest, Mikey Johnson, Julian, Ralston. That's near enough a bench there itself. So. And then we had guys like MacArthur on the bench, so there is options there at Celtic.
It's not him, it's the other one, McCarthy.
Did I say MacArthur? Yeah. May as well have signed him and all when you're not midfielder. So in that way, but with the new signings that started, Carter Vickers is a big unit of a boy, I think.
Did you see the back on the guy? What a ninja turtle.
Back like a barrel of snakes.
Unbelievable.
That boy deadlifts, didn't he? So
he knows where the weights are kept.
I think he'll... In that way, be suited to the game still. I think Blair, a scout, said aerially he's a bit worried about him, so time will tell on that one. I thought Juranovic had a poor first half, but came into it in the second half. Jota, good first half,
vice versa,
but fell out it. And so there was things there, but it was the lack of options. It wasn't quite working for Celtic into that second half. And I was looking at the bench going, what can we really do here to change anything? But luckily we did get the goal a bit fortuitously. But
screamer, absolute pile driver from
absolute
distance.
Roaster. But in the performance, yes, it was 3-0, but going back to last season, we either wouldn't have won that game or there was no way we'd have won that 3-0, but we looked pretty comfortable in the end. I don't think there was ever a chance Celtic we were losing that game. It was just...
They might have scored, but that would have been it. Yeah.
Watching it back, it's not as bad as being it, because you get that wee bit more anxious and this could be one of those days, and there's still 25 minutes to go, isn't there? But they got the job done in the end, and it was just good. It's an easy game for guys to come in and have their first start. I mean, even Juranovic's first start was at Ibrox. This is him. He's had his Celtic
and his natural position as well.
And all the way, just before, in case I forget, Joe Hart, another save that kept Celtic in the game.
That was the next thing I was wanting to talk about. So I'm glad you brought it. Let's talk about goodwill, Stephen. Joe Hart and Albin Ayeti, two players that have got a lot of goodwill from the Celtic support. It would seem. I mean, we were saying before the game. I can't quite pinpoint why, but we were saying on the reaction podcast, we do a portion before the game and after the game, that we just want Ayeti to do well, and that is going on Twitter and having a look. That is the overriding reaction. People just want Albin Ayeti to do well, and obviously the manager wants them to do well, saying he was working his socks off midweek, saying that in the game he wasn't going for him, he stuck in. Something the manager spoke about as well. We spoke about a lot of the deliveries didn't seem to suit Ayeti, but he managed to get a couple of poachers goals, which is what we hoped for him. And then Joe Hart as well. When Joe Hart signed, there is no doubt that there was a lot of people out there that did not want Joe Hart in a Celtic shirt. Yeah, there was all this stuff about the ball at the feet and all the other stuff that
he's left. He's left.
Where was that save at the weekend?
Another one to his left. We called them the calculator shaggers, jokingly. Like there was people from that aspect of the Celtic support that just Joe Hart is the wrong signing for Celtic. But ever since he's come in, I'm calm now. There's a lot of goodwill towards Joe Hart, and you could tell when he got that captain's armband, there was a ripple of applause going through the stadium, like he deserved it, like he was a natural fit for it.
Huge applause for the save he made as well, which is again, it's one of those saves you would probably expect a keeper to make. It was a good save, but it wasn't like something
other fans would expect keepers to make.
Exactly. Yeah, in general, football fans would expect a keeper to make that, but we have been robbed of that for quite some time. But it was a good save. But even that, you watch the game back, and there's the huge kind of ripple of applause or cheers from directly behind the goals as well. And it's really nice to see with Joe Hart, because I think we were talking on the way back from the game about how I think Celtic fans just in general, I'm sure it's the same with other clubs, I don't know, I couldn't tell you, we're obviously just closer to this situation, but we just like that. We just like that kind of story where a guy comes and sort of resurrects his career, and he's a big personality, which we obviously like in our keepers as well. Like one of the most popular keepers we've ever had was Artur Boruc, who was a cracking keeper as well. I don't mean to imply that he was just a big personality, but he married those things very well. He was an incredibly impressive keeper, but also a huge personality that got the fans behind him. Joe Hart, he's not quite as combustible, he's not quite as unpredictable as Artur Boruc, but he's a big character to have on the pitch.
The leader we needed, isn't he?
Yeah. That's it. He's a leader. He's very vocal, very active in the games. You know, giving shouts to people left, right, and centre, organised defence. It's exactly all the things we thought we were getting with Joe Hart. He sort of delivered with them, and we're quite pleased to see it. Really good to see a manager that's willing to give Callum McGregor some time off.
Oh,
sub him.
I was shocked at that at the time. I was like, why is he taking him off? And then I was like, oh, this is how other teams do it. This is what they don't run it. Because we've seen it last year with even Scott Brown. You're like, just take him off. Like MD would be better right now because he can't run, and McGregor, I think he played 2 full games for Scotland during the week, and I think he came on as a sub for the other one. So that was like 3 games in 6 days for the guy, and we all know how much football he's played, and that's us lost Kyogo, who's already played half a season in Japan and came straight here. So
does it worry you how different the team is without Kyogo? Because I think our performance there was a lot down to the fact Kyogo was missing.
He is the catalyst for this team.
Definitely. It's very hard to replicate that.
Yeah,
you can't just put any player in that position and expect a Kyogo performance. That's just impossible. So that takes me back to Ayeti, because there's still goodwill certainly from this part of the world, from this table, towards Ayeti. We all hoped he would do well. Me in particular, I'm still seething about Charlie Adam having written him off as soon as he signed, so I'm still bristling about that. So I just kind of want him to prove that wrong. He's not really done much in his Celtic career to date, but he got 2 goals there. But I do understand
I thought it was pretty terrible the rest of the game.
There's a little bit of debate after the game as to whether it was a good performance from him despite the goals, and I think both of those things can exist. Just like you can say Celtic didn't play that well but still get a good win. I think Ayeti get both of those goals, but I'm not going to say he was terrible because he got 2 goals, 2 crucial goals. But I think from that you can glean, from the performance, you can glean how he's likely to play in the future. Yeah. And that's, I don't think it was good enough. So I think going forward, he needs to do more. But I mean, you can't criticise the 2 goals he got.
It's going to be a difficult one here because he's never going to do what Kyogo does. He doesn't have that in his game, but he can do other things, and it just. I think I seen on Sports Scene he had 15 touches and got 2 goals. And while that's good, it's Ross County at home. You need to be either pushing them back and creating space, or dropping in and bouncing it off to your number 10 and the 2 wide players, or just making those runs Kyogo makes, not giving the defenders a minute. And I just don't think he did that. But on the other hand, if it was Kyogo or Edward in the situations where he got his 2 goals from, I'm not sure they score those goals. This is why I think the goodwill we have is because like guys like Bayo and all that, you never seen anything. But with Ayeti, you can see he's got an eye for goal, because we've seen him come in and score goals last year. Just the performance has dropped, the injuries hit, and everything was terrible. So if Celtic can get everything else around Ayeti firing, they'll create
fit and firing.
They'll create chances for him, but
he's still a young player.
While he didn't play well,
24.
he didn't have chances created for him, which I will say.
But that's what we were talking about in the first half. Like all these not long balls, but the sort of crosses into the box. There was nothing really solid for Ayeti to feed off of.
Well, on new boy Cameron Carter-Vickers, I was impressed with him, and it kind of what I wanted towards the end of the transfer window was a centre half in. There wasn't that much noise about it. We'd been linked with Cameron Carter-Vickers a couple of times. It wasn't him specifically I wanted, but the profile of the guy I wanted Celtic to bring in at such a late juncture was kind of I think a couple of the examples he used were the Encham or the Frimpong type profile, meaning that he's quite young, but a guy who's old enough to play, but has maybe just been held back but just behind better players at the club he's at. That was the kind of guy I meant, and Carter Vickers suits that perfectly. He's more than old enough to be staking a claim somewhere. He's been out on loan 6 or 7 times, I think.
This is 7th loan. Played
plenty at Bournemouth last season. I didn't realise he's played this season as well. He played in the European qualifier for Spurs, so he's ready to hit the ground running, which he appears to have done with Celtic. So
bit of cramp at the end.
He did. He's carrying that upper body a bit right enough. He's a big old lad, but a guy like that coming in just suddenly, and we're talking about goodwill, a guy like that all of a sudden just reassures me so much, because prior to that it was Stephen Welsh and Starfelt. With Julian in the distant future, God knows what's going to happen with him, don't know what condition he's going to turn up in, but bringing a guy like that in who's slotted straight into the team and played well, good range of passing on him by the looks of it, got a screamer of a goal as well. A guy who can come in, settle in, looks like he's been here for a while. All of a sudden, you're like, well, Cameron Carter-Vickers, couldn't remember his name. Carter-Vickers, Starfelt, Welsh, and then Julian somewhere off in the distance.
Hey, don't forget the man.
Beaton. It all of a sudden just feels a lot better, doesn't it? Just with the addition of that one guy. I feel
better knowing that Beaton is miles away from the Celtic team. Out of sight.
We end up in midfield right enough because Sorrow's been rotten recently. But
Bowling goalie is another one who, with Montgomery coming off the bench, Bowling goalie is now what, fourth?
Scales as well.
Scales fourth or fifth.
McGregor.
Fifth choice left back. Well out the picture. And I suppose this is a good place to sort of wrap up in summary, because what is disappointing is we look as if we're making progress on the pitch, but that progress needs backed up by what's going on in the background. Off the pitch is very fragile, and we can't have a basket case in the back and expect 11 or 12 guys, 13 guys, whatever it is in the pitch. I know there's 11 players in the pitch, but I was trying to add up the subs as well. To keep winning and keep doing it with all this crap happening in the background. So that's where the priorities lie now for Celtic, getting this stuff sorted in the background. I think there's going to be a lot of change for Celtic. Everything points to, and all the rumours that we've heard as a point to, a new chairman coming in, new non-executive directors. This is the most boring thing you can ever talk about in a football podcast. See if you do us one favour, Celtic, right? Going to just prevent us from talking about this. Please put us out our misery so we don't have to talk about this anymore. We want to sit here and have at the end of the season, we want to have a title party in the studio. Yeah. So that's what we want from you, Celtic. The other three of us, last podcast of the season, bevy.
We'll do it right.
Mariachi band.
We'll smash fuck out each other. We'll get fireworks and during the day. We'll go into the city centre and wreck the place.
You want to be like the Rangers fans. And on that bombshell, we shall wrap up. I just want to say thank you so much for you guys for tuning in. Thank you for sticking with us. No video the last couple of weeks because various reasons we've been ill and all that sort of stuff. International break as well. A lot of people didn't realise we do not do the flagship on the international break. Lots coming up. Celtic have got Betis midweek as we enter the Europa League group stages. We will be professionally scouting all of Celtic's Europa League opponents for the Patreon. We'll have a podcast out detailing what we can expect, how they can hurt us, how we can hurt them, all that sort of stuff. A full profile of the teams that we're playing, as well as all the players we've signed have been fully scouted. All of that is on patreon.com/20minutetims, and that's why you see us here, because this studio, the camera and all that stuff was because we're supported by our lovely patrons, and we really appreciate it. Melly, would you like to say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Stephen, would you like to say goodbye?
Yes, seeing as you always seem to frame it as a yes or no question, yes, I would. And enjoy the week, folks, because we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. I'm really looking forward to the Betis game, actually. That's a tasty wee European tie.
Live preview. So we're back with video content exclusive for the Patreon, doing a live preview of the Betis game. We'll obviously have the reaction to the Betis game as well. Patreon.com/20minutetims. And next week, bold predictions.
I've been teasing this for so long, it's time to unleash them.
Thank you for listening. Episode 270 of the 20 Minute Tims podcast. I'm your host,